Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Triple Threat Comics YouTube channel. I'm your host, Ian Miller. Today we actually have a new guest with us, so I'm very excited about it. Please welcome Alin Silverwood. Alan, welcome to the show.
How are you? Thanks.
Of course. And you're also the editor and founder of Pop Skull Press.
Right. That's the imprint that I'm using. It's been my LLC for several years, so it just made sense. Do a nice little logo and use it going into the comic stuff. It fits. It's like came from the name Pop Skull was actually a term that kind of like I was doing a lot of pop culture work, and I was like, oh, okay, so I'm thinking about pop culture, and then I had been watching Ken Burns' Civil War, and one of the terms that they used as far back as the Civil War for booze was pop skull, and I'm like, oh, that's just kind of funny. So I'm like, I'm going to use that.
Wow.
There it is. That's where it comes from.
That's great, especially from a Ken Burns documentary. Wow.
Yeah, they mentioned it in the Civil War in one of the episodes. They mentioned that they were some of the terms that they used for booze. The soldiers used for booze, and I was like, that's pretty funny. A lot of people kind of know it. If they know it from like, oh, I thought that came from like, Prohibition. It's like, well, I'm sure they used it again in Prohibition, but it actually been around since the Civil War at least.
Wow.
Maybe longer. But
well, folks, I just learned something new today that I'm very excited about. That.
It's kind of fun. Yeah, it cracks me up a little bit.
Yeah. Okay, so Alan, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and also tell us about your comics?
Okay. Okay. Myself, I was I'm from Los Angeles originally, and I was living there, and I had started reading Marvel comics, and there was this thing called Mark's Remarks that Mark Grunwald used to do in all of the Marvel comic books, and I was reading those when they were coming out, and he was basically telling you how to go about breaking into the industry. And I was like, I would like to break into the industry. So I followed his advice. And one of the things he advised was going into conventions and meeting the editors and talking with them about your ideas and stuff and that kind of thing. And I was like, okay. So I started going down to San Diego. In those days, San Diego, even though it was still the biggest convention, it wasn't like it is now. You could actually go in and have conversations and talk to the people from Marvel, stuff. And I was down there and I was talking to Richard Starkings, who was an editor and writer from Marvel UK. And he had just come over here, and I told him I was from LA, and he's like, oh God, I've always wanted to see LA. And I'm like, well, you should just come up. And so after the convention, he came up and visited, and he hung out and ran around, and we became friends. And a few months later, he'd moved over to New York from England, and he called me up and he said, Bobby Chase's assistant editor is leaving. So you might want to apply for that position, and you can come here and stay with me, you get on your feet. And I was like, oh, okay. All right. So I threw in my application right away. I was already working as an editor on some trade magazines. So, I threw in the application and headed off to New York. And fortunately I got the job. I started working there and working on the Incredible Hulk and Ghost Rider and G.I. Joe and She-Hulk and some other special projects. And I even got a little writing work while I was there. I didn't manage to stay very long. I had a lot of personal stuff going on. So I left a little prematurely. I did a little work after I left for them. And then I moved back to LA. I was doing work in Hollywood at Paramount Pictures. And I was working on, the home entertainment division. I was working on things like Titanic and Braveheart and Forrest Gump and the Star Trek series and stuff. So that was kind of cool and fun. I was like, okay, I'm still having fun. And then I got kind of burned out in Hollywood, and I went on and wound up in toys. And I've been working on Hot Wheels for Mattel for 20 years up until this year. And during that was a long run on the cars, and during that time I kind of got like incentivized to start doing some of my own stuff. So I wrote a book that I've been trying to write all of my life, and I'm still working on the sequel, which is late. I wrote a book of short stories, and then I started doing the comic stuff, and I actually got somewhere with that and got some of those out. thank you, Kickstarter and everything. So it makes it a little easier to do. So that was
Yes.
great. But, that's how I got here. On the short, that's the abbreviated version of how I got here. I actually live in Portland now. I moved up here not realizing that like there's Dark Horse and there's Image and there's a big comic community up here,
Yeah.
which is really awesome. So I've met some people, but I've been kind of shy about talking to them. It's like I wouldn't mind going back in on staff on some of these things someday, but haven't tried that yet.
Well, especially with comics that you create yourself, they're always your babies. You want
Yeah.
to be very protective, especially if you're pitching to some of the other companies, the bigger ones. So yeah, I completely understand that. So going to the indie route was probably a smart move for you, right?
I think for those, yeah. I mean, there's still things that I look at from the time I worked at Marvel. I had these, I had proposals for series into the, to the staff, the editorial staff, the chief, and everything. And I had an editor ready to do one of my books, and he was like pushing for it, and we still couldn't get an approval on it. I was too new, So it was like, well, okay. And it's like, I still think I'd like to do those things for them. There's still things I'd like to do in the Marvel universe, but they've changed it so much since then that it's like, could I make it work? And I look at ways I'm like, yeah, I could still make that work and it would still be a good thing to do. But, now they're Disney and it's like, yeah, they're only hiring like people who write movies now. It's like, oh, okay, I might have done all the writing for Marvel I'll ever do, which wasn't that much. But I mean, a lot of people can't say they did any. So I'm like, oh, I did do a few things. So I'm like, that's kind of cool. But my stuff, I had the story in my head for years and years, and it kept growing and evolving. It wouldn't go away. It wouldn't leave me alone. And that's, I think that's kind of the thing with writers. It's like, you've got the idea that you got to work on. If it won't leave you, and years go by and it still keeps growing. And that's when it's like, I've got to do this. I've got to make this thing. I have to do this. It's not going to leave me alone. So
yeah,
that's I also have the unfortunate problem of having severe ADD and some neurodivergency, which makes it a little bit more challenging. And it's not uncommon among creative people. Something seems to go hand in hand with some of that creativity and neurodivergency. And it's, it makes it hard. I'm always kind of surprised and impressed and happy when anyone who's struggling with that challenge actually accomplishes anything. It's like, oh, I actually finished a book. Wow. That's unbelievable to me, myself, that I did. But, so it just makes things come out slower. And I was like, oh, there's so much I wish I had done sooner. If I'd have known it was going to be such a slow process for me, I would have started a lot sooner on, really sitting down and pushing myself the way I've had to. But, it does pay off. It's worth getting in and pushing yourself.
Yeah.
Which is kind of important to know when you have those kind of issues.
Absolutely. You definitely always want to do better. Always want to apply yourself better and say, you know what, I don't have to have this hold me back. I don't have to use this as a crutch. I could use this. I could move forward, but it does take time. It does take a lot of hard work. And I also speak from experience because I did actually have a learning disability growing up. So I understand that. I don't have what you have, but it's a long process.
I think it was really helpful for me. I didn't know this growing up because they didn't know much about this stuff when I was a kid. It's like, this is all fairly recent that they actually really know and understand a lot of this stuff, and they're still figuring out a lot about it. But for me, it was like I wasn't really aware about some of this stuff until my daughter started manifesting it when they knew about it, and they started looking for it in her. And I was like, all the things they were saying, it's like, this is a symptom, this symptom. And it was like all these symptoms. It's like, those are the things that we're always saying. She's just like me. And I'm like, is this genetic? And the doctor's like, oh yeah, it should, it can be, And so I was like, oh, maybe I better get tested for that. And I got tested, and I asked the doctor after the test, was like, so do I have ADD? And she's like, oh yeah. And I was like, oh God. Suddenly my whole life made sense. And it was like, if I had never had a kid, I might not have known, you know? So it's like, once you know, then you can start working around, working ways around it. But the problem is, at a certain point in your life, you've kind of developed, habits and workarounds to get you through, maybe just enough to squeak by.
Yeah.
But you've got those habits and trying to like form new ones and different ones to be more, make more progress. It's not easy. It's definitely, it's like the other half of my life is going to be spent probably still working on that stuff. it's like, it's what it is, but.
Yeah, but it's great to see that you're also not letting this hold you back, which is fantastic.
Oh yeah, no, it is what it is,
Yeah, exactly.
Um,
So why don't we talk about your comics? So why
okay.
don't you tell us about Spies Among Us? How did
Mhm.
that start and what's it about?
Okay, well, Spies Among Us, the SPI stands for Superpowered Individual. It was during the time up until like a week ago or something that superheroes was supposedly trademarked by both Marvel and Disney, and
Yeah,
I'm like, well, what am I going to call my guys? I saw other people calling them, something, superhumans or whatever, and I came up with Superpowered Individual, and I'm like, and I can say spy, and that's kind of a thing. So I was like, so SPI, Spies Among Us, and it's based on that old sort of, there's an old saying about spies among us, and I'm like, that'll be a real fun title. And sometimes I'm a little too clever. I'm not sure everybody actually gets it, but it's like I'll throw that out there and see what happens. And so I'm basically superpowered individuals exist. Story starts out in our world essentially in 2012.
Mhm.
And it kind of explains that, or it hints at why that's there at the end of the first book. But it starts out in 2012, and basically the superpowered individuals have been hidden from public
Yeah,
for ever since, at least since the advent of like modern mass communication. Um, so the public doesn't know that there's actually really are superheroes or superpowered individuals. Um, and the main reason for this is because this character called Dr. Anonymous, they just call him Dr. Anonymous, is this guy who shows up anytime there's any kind of a superpowered individual event that, blows up and gets on the news and people start, talking about it, or winds up in, on TV or radio or anything like that. Dr. Anonymous shows up and he unhappens it. It's the best way to describe it. It's like there's something that he does that suddenly it like goes back to like it never happened. Even if it's already been out into the public, it's like that just stops. It's like that never actually happened. So there's like, what is he doing to like that he can kind of like reverse everything that just happened here? Like if like imagine the Hulk in a battle with like Ultron or something, and they're like going through buildings and tearing up city blocks and blasting things off the planet and killing people and stuff. And it's like literally something like that could happen. And Dr. Anonymous, boom, it never happened. And everything is just like, what, nobody knows what he's been doing, but he's been basically keeping the public from knowing about them. Um, and he disappears one day. Something happens in the news, and he stopped showing up. So the first time that there's a superpowered individual conflict after he stopped appearing, it goes public, and suddenly they call that the exposure event because now the public is aware that these people have been living among us. The spies have been living among us, and nobody knew. And there's a lot of reasons why that's secret. Basically for their safety and stuff, but also some of them are not good. So then there's a bunch of factions of spies jockeying for what they can do. Some guys are trying to take advantage of the situation. Some guys are trying to just survive. But then there's one group that I focus on that are kind of investigating. They're trying to figure out, they're like, how do we get Dr. Anonymous back? Can we undo all of this now? Because the world's in chaos over this. So they start kind of like doing some investigating, trying to figure out like, who was he? What was he doing? Where is he now? Did he meet with foul play or what happened to him? So, and in the process of that, somebody starts kill a spy and stuff. We start having this kind of panicky situation. There's conflicts with sides and factions, and all of this chaos is going on. So I kind of throw you right into the middle of this chaos. Plus, the public is like attacking. Sorry, I need that. So yeah, the public is an outcry, and they're basically trying to navigate through all this chaos and find an answer and figure out what happened to Dr. Anonymous. And one of the characters, one of the main characters that I have, I call Black Ghost. And he was like one of the first characters that I had in mind to create years and years ago. It's kind of based on a tropical fish, actually, but he's not a fish. He's basically, it's just the coloring and the name. He's kind of like, think of Vision. He's kind of like he has a density control thing.
Yeah.
But he has this really bad case of what is that symptom called? What's his name? Mandela effect. Oh. He's a really bad case of the Mandela effect, as in like there's constantly things, it's like we all have that we've talked about that. Like there's things that you go like, I could have swore like a segment of the population be like, I could have swore that they could call it the Mandela effect because they thought he died in prison. And then of course he got out of prison and became like, the president of South America. So it's like, well, why was there so many people that actually thought he died in prison? Well, imagine someone who has that kind of thought about like a lot of stuff. It's like it doesn't jibe with his memory. And so there's like, why is his memory so far off? And then some of the other spies have a little bit of that, but he has a lot of it. So it's kind of like, it's really strange, but he's like, just, kind of rolling along with it because he still finds that he fits in where he's at, but he doesn't really know why he has this. And that plays into what's going on as well. The part of it's like a symptom of the whole bigger picture. I've released 2 issues, and then there's been kind of a couple of health problems and stuff that hung up the 3rd issue, which is, just about ready for release. And I also put out a handbook, which you see, kind of like that Marvel handbook of the universe, handbook of the Marvel universe thing that guys will do if you've got like a lot of characters and stuff. And I'm like, yeah, that'll be fun. I'll put one of those out. So I put one of those out. I've got another one of those ready to go. And there's one of the covers. The handbook, Right. So, and then the 3rd one, it's like, I don't think I sent you a cover of number 3. I should have. We've got some really fun stuff. There's also some interesting things that kind of come up. It's like, I like to start kind of delving into things. It's like, what if you were, superpowered individuals could hide among us if they look like us, but like you can see Wild Swan back there with wings. It's like, if she was walking around every day, people would know. So it's like, so Dr. Anonymous can't just be out every day. So there's a secret town in the Black Hills that they live in. Anyone who can't pass for human lives there. So there's like this, anybody that might look very, very unhuman, they have to live there. Otherwise they're all exposed. So that's kind of a whole storyline that's kind of like a subplot of this. And there's also the subplot of like, oh, did the government know? Well, of course the government knew. So it's like, we get the 3rd issue and you find out like, how's the government been hiding them? And it's like, Area 51.
What?
You think it's aliens? Aliens are involved and they're not what you think they are. They've just been kind of like hide. See, that's the court of justice right there. That's the government squad. Those 4 guys that are out trying to round up, or they either want to recruit you to help them round up other spies, or they want to round you up and take you back to Area 51 for review and detention. And it starts, General Justice there in front. It starts to kind of like eat at his conscience now that it's public and he's seeing the public reaction to all this stuff a little bit more. He's starting to go, I don't know about this whole thing, our approach to this whole thing. He starts to kind of wonder, and that leads to a development. But yeah, I have the true explanation for Area 51. It's not just about the aliens. It's also a detention camp, a massive underground detention camp for superpowered individuals. So I like it.
I like it a lot.
Yeah. It's. I think it's like sometimes I wonder. It's like, am I throwing too much at the reader? And it's like, because I've got kind of a lot of different things going on, but I think they're kind of all just a little bit of each of them is enough to be excited about any of them, And I'm hoping that will carry people through and they'll get to the point where like it's like, oh, I really want to see what the whole thing is with Dr. Anonymous. And I dropped the second issue here at the end. I drop in a short story that kind of shows you what was the last appearance of Dr. Anonymous, and it gives you a little hint. It's like he just kind of comes down, and it's from the point of view of a couple of the superheroes, superpowered individuals, and he comes down and kind of does his thing, and they're just kind of like, see, he just shows up and fixes it, and it's like they still don't know what the heck he did, but it's like he just makes it unhappen, something that happens, and it's like, okay, but the superpowered individuals will always remember. It's like the public doesn't remember, but they still retain the memory somehow.
Yeah.
It's among them, they know that this happens, so there's a lot of questions to be answered.
Absolutely.
It's a big mystery, but I'm actually getting ready. One of the things that is a part of this, and I'd be spoiling it if I explained why they're a part of it, but I've been taking a lot of old public domain characters and doing new versions of them, or mostly actually I take them and I pull a couple together and I do mashups into a whole new character. And it's like, oh, I'm playing with, like I took a character called Nightmare, and a very popular character, if you know anything about the public domain guys, Black Terror.
Yeah.
Well, I mixed Nightmare and Black Terror together and came up with Night Terror, and he's been one of my really popular characters. But he's part of that group of those guys, and they play a part in this. I'm thinking hopefully next year to put out an issue. It's kind of like a companion book to Spies Among Us. It's their story, and it will start from their point of view and why they're tied into the story. And it'll be another kind of big hint as to what's going on. So that should be kind of exciting to see. Plus, it's like people love those public domain guys, and it's like I've been kind of showing them off, and people are just really excited about them. They just love the characters that I've been kind of creating out of those guys, and it's like, yeah, I think it'll be really fun to just play with them as their own lead rather than just side hustles for Spies Among Us. They've got their own thing going now. So I'm like, oh, this. In fact, the other night, it was a couple of nights ago, I'm like, I need to really just kind of write that first issue. I was up until 5:00 in the morning. And that's one of the things about being a writer. Sometimes when it hits you.
Oh yeah.
And so I'm just like, okay, well, I'm writing and I'm doing this in the notes on my phone because it's the middle of the night, and I'm like going, blah, blah, blah. So I've got like the whole first issue pretty much outlined and ready to go. Now I just have to write it up and then, put it in an artist's hands. Unfortunately, I was never gifted with drawing. I can visualize very well. And, I design all these guys and I have to kind of like draw crude sketches and pull reference things. It's kind of like this. And then I take it to an artist who can actually do the magic, has the actual talent. And I'm like, I want him to look like this, this, and this. And I explain it and show them what I can. And I've been very lucky. They've been wonderful at actually, executing what I'm seeing in my mind. I'm like going, that's amazing. It's like great. And it's like, so that's been really fun coming up with the characters and then seeing, all these guys, just seeing how they're going to look when they're out there. One of the main ideas behind Spies is that these guys who are human and have been spies, they haven't had to hide their identities or anything. So they aren't generally walking around with a costume in the closet, for when they go to work. Some of them, yes, but mostly not. So it's like you'll see guys that are walking around and it's like, did he get that from like a sports store and a gardening center? Kind of a thing. It's like, so it's like, obviously some of them just immediately had to scramble and find stuff to put on themselves if they wanted to go out in public and not be identified by their civilian names or sites, so it's like, so there's a little bit of that. So some of the outfits you'll see, you're like, that just looks kind of cobbled together from stuff. And it's like, but that works for the story. That's exactly what it should look like. And then there's guys that, they're kind of professional and they have stuff, or maybe they just had it because they wanted to, or maybe they were able to put it together. There is a main character in there called the Fabricator. And he's kind of one of these guys. He's become kind of a very rich and wealthy guy because he creates, his gift, his superpower is the ability to create technology and things like that. So both spies who you would consider heroes and who you would consider villains have been going to him as time has gone on, they go to him and he makes stuff for them, and sometimes it's a suit, sometimes it's technology, whatever. And he does it and he gets paid, but he's been serving both sides. And then he finds out now that they're exposed. It's like, it's dangerous to be him with both sides coming knocking on your door. So he has to kind of pick a side, which he's kind of an interesting character. I've always liked the idea of him, and it's kind of fun putting him in there and watching how things roll out for him. He winds up being kind of like the base for our investigators. They're basing themselves because he's got his mansion. It's like, think of like the Avengers mansion, but it's like, it starts in Los Angeles. So it's like, he's got this mansion that's kind of like, it's got all these protections on and stuff. And if he happens to turn them off, it's like instant trouble.
Yeah.
So it's like, so they kind of wind up working at his house a lot.
No, that's fascinating. Yeah, especially with a character that's able to come up with any tech or suits that either side would have. So yeah, I would sense, especially when everything has been exposed, just them both sides coming to his door. You're like, oh God, what do I do now?
It's good for business, except that it's like there's a battle in your backyard between two warring factions now. It's like it's tearing your house up, kind of thing. It's like this is good for business, but it's not good for business, So it's like, can somebody just kind of stay here and protect me? It's like he can protect himself. Believe me, it's like he's kind of like, I've always loved the character in the X-Men Forge.
Mm-hmm.
I've always thought he was way underused and underappreciated in the Marvel universe. It's like I'm like, forget Tony Stark. He can spend weeks in a lab trying to come, or a workshop trying to come up with a new suit of armor. And Forge is like, his mutant power is like, I've got a gun that can, blow Iron Man apart. It's like, I'm like, that's just a better power. It's like, Tony Stark doesn't really have a power. He's just kind of like in a suit. But it's like, but if you like Forge, Fabricator's a little bit like Forge in that. Except that he can't manufacture. Like, I think Forge can actually literally like pull stuff together out of nothing. I can't remember now, but Fabricator can't do that. He does still have to have like components that he can he just kind of like warps them into doing what he needs them to do. But some of these things, it's like, it's really funny. You like are always asking people what they're inspired by or what influenced this or that. And I'm like, mine's going to be like the weird characters. Mine's going to be like the ones that were not appreciated. And I'm like, I'm going to take them and I'm going to use a version of them that is more, up front, because it's like, I just think that was like too good to be like left alone. I got another character. There was a character in the Squadron Supreme, if you remember them.
Mm.
And it's like where Hyperion came from and everything. There was a character in their big miniseries that he was originally a villain. And he wound up working with the good guys. And I'm like, I kind of follow that path with the character. He had basically, he could use wire, like, and he could shoot it and entangle you or whatever. And I'm like, that's a really, really useful power, It's like, especially if you're like trying to catch people or whatever. So I have this villain show up and she's called Briar. And she has these like tangle. They're like almost like vine kind of things with spikes on them. Think of it as like barbed wire, but it's like, like if it's like what tumbleweeds are made of, that kind of bramble briar. And she can shoot those out and use those. And so I have her first show up as a villain, and she has a quick change of heart, and then she starts working with the good guys. But I'm like, that's just kind of like that's totally an homage to a character created by Mark Gruenwald, who, again, if it wasn't for Mark Gruenwald, I never even would have gotten into comics. So I'm like, let me do some homages to some people and some of their characters when I can, a little bit here and there. But yeah, so there are a few characters. It's like, I think I know where this guy came from. And then this character's like, I'm like, I don't think I've ever even seen this. I'm like, I'm looking at some of them and I'm like, I don't even know what this could be based on. This is different from anybody I know. Dr. Anonymous is one of those guys. And this guy's Suction, but you can kind of see on the left in the shadows there. He's a bad guy. He has this ability to create little pocket dimensions or little pocket spaces that are like vast. And he can, so as a thief, he can basically, he's called Suction because he opens these pockets up and he's got them like in his cape. It's where he's kind of like formed them. He opens them up and stuff goes in there. And he can just like store all the stuff and walk off with it. That's kind of it's this whole weird thing. It's like, I mean, he tries to steal. You see the golden gavel that it's not Thor's hammer, but
Yeah.
it is powerful, and it is tech that may be alien. We're not sure about that yet, but General Justice uses this thing, and in battle with Section's like, I'm going to pull that out of his, I'm going to take that. His Section into those dimensions is so strong it actually does pull the gavel away, and it starts to go in there, and then they're able to catch it, but just barely, and they're like halfway into his, poking into his dimension there, fighting to get that back. Yeah. But some of them are just weird. I have some weird characters. I do some weird guys. It's kind of fun. I like doing some weird guys. And he's one of the weirder ones, I think. Yeah, but there's quite a few interesting characters, and you just get a little taste of some of them, a little bit more about a few of them. They're the ones that are going to be the core team, but it's like, what is going on? And in the background, there are some villains that you just get like in silhouette on the last page of the first issue, and it's like they obviously have another plan, and then you start to see a couple of them at the end of this issue in the short story. And then you'll see more of them start to emerge. By the fourth issue, you see another one in the third issue, and then the rest of them, so the last of that group, is in the fourth issue, and that's all of them together exposed, so you can see who they are. But if you go back to, so there's this weird little team that are kind of like they're like bad guys, but they're like super ineffective and kind of idiots. So you actually go down to the handbook. I think that Mr. Misbehavior is on the cover of the handbook. So you see on the very far left side, that's Dr. Drainer.
Yeah.
He's an interesting story because he's a guy whose power is to drain the powers temporarily of superpowered individuals. Now, if that's your power and you're walking around in the world and you don't know there are superpowered individuals, you don't know you have a power. How would you know? So suddenly when the exposure event happens, he suddenly is scared by superpowered individual. And it's like, and then he realizes he turned them off. So he's instantly, oh, I've got this. I can do something with this. So he winds up with some no good guys. That power is like, that's one of those, like, oh, that's a really good power. The guy in the back looks like he's got something on a slingshot. He's just this kind of goof. He's kind of like the head of this team. His name's Mr. Misbehavior. He basically generates these balls of power, they're just like balls of energy. And he could throw them at you, and it's like that was all he could really do. So he went to the fabricator, and he had this like kind of high-tech slingshot made, and he could basically now he can like shoot them at you. He can basically form them and fire, and it's like, and they're concussive enough to knock people out of the sky. Wind Spinner, who you see there on the left up under the logo with doing like the tornadoes with her arms. Yeah. She's kind of based on Simone Biles a little bit. Because I was always very impressed with how much air she can, like how far Simone is, like, it's like she jumps like 4 times her height in the air. And I'm like, I needed a character with that's kind of like got some kind of, power. And I was like, oh yeah, winds, like, and so it's like she whirls her arms at like speeds that you can't even tell, and it creates these what she calls wind cones, and she can direct those at you and knock you around, or she can catch you up in them and throw you. She's really powerful, but she's also one of the most level-headed, sensible people among the investigators. But she's pretty neat. Wild Swan is the chick with the wings, and it's like I think she's also one of the characters that I've thought of the longest, and I thought she'd be fun. It's basically she's like Asian American. She's from China. She's of Chinese birth, and she's a really tragic backstory. But she can fly at high speeds, and she's got a lot. Every spy in my world has strength, agility, endurance, and speed above human. Now, some of them have more. Streamliner, you'll see down there, leaving streamlines. He's kind of like, like your Flash type of character. He's like a speedster, but he leaves this trail behind him that eventually dissipates. It's not like just speed lines. It's actually a thing. It's like, when they show Flash running around in the books, it's like they just show him to show that he's moving at speed. Well, in this case, that's actually something that's there. It's like, if you see him go by, you see this thing standing there and you can put your hand through it. It's like until it dissipates, it doesn't do anything that I know of. I haven't made a decision about that, but with Wild Swan, her whole thing is like, she's got those elevated things and being able to fly at a higher speed because of the wings. And then she's got 2 stun sticks that she had made that she could fly by and hit you. And she's got 3 settings on them. And it's like, there's like tickle, ouch, and good night. It's like, yeah. So it's like, so she uses them sometimes just for fun. She's kind of a weird character in that she's probably, due to her tragic backstory, she's a little bit twisted. She looks like a model, a gentle, delicate, beautiful model with wings. And the fact is, what she is a cigar smoking, whiskey swilling, poker playing, cheating at poker, foul mouthed, hard case superhero. So she's exactly the opposite of what you think she looks like she would be, except for you notice that she's got a cigar in her mouth most of the time.
Yeah, I was about to say, because that looks like a cigar.
She's got a cigar. It's this chick with a cigar, and she likes to cheat at poker and stuff. So I've got this really special image. I didn't send it to you, of her, really pretty painting. She's standing at a table and she throws down her poker hand and it's 5 aces. She's got her cigar in her mouth and her whiskey in the other hand, and she's just thrown down a hand and you can see it's 5 aces, and it's like, yeah.
Wow. That sounds epic. All this sounds epic. And obviously you can buy issues 1 and 2, and of course the Classified Files Handbook on IndiePod.com, which I actually might make a purchase late today, so don't be surprised.
Thanks. Thank you. Yeah, I'm trying to make the characters interesting and fun, and sometimes there's a little bit of tragedy too. All of us, we're not without our sad sides to our backgrounds, and so Wild Swan has a pretty awful one, and Fortress there in the front. She's basically kind of like your. She's kind of like a cross between Colossus and the Thing, in that she armors up like Colossus from a human form, and but it's more like stone, like Thing, but it's like a castle wall. That's hence her name, Fortress. But she's probably about 9 feet tall versus everybody else who might be like 6 feet. She's a bigger character, wow. And she armors up, but. How she found out that she even had a power before the exposure event. She knew she had this, but she found it out because she needed to protect herself from a bad situation. Mm-hmm. So her background story is a little bit tragic too. But yeah, that's the idea, is to get to the end of the story, because at the end of the story, we will find out what happened to Dr. Anonymous, what he was doing, and why that's so amazing. It's like, why is that? What's so amazing about him? And it's like, you look at him and it's like, oh, he just kind of looks, there he is in the middle, and it's like, he just kind of looks interesting, it's like, but kind of playing sort of, but it's like, yeah, that's why Anonymous, it really applies to why he's there, been doing what he's doing. It's because he's been keeping them anonymous through his efforts. But we'll find out, what happened to him, what he was doing, and why he's, not doing it anymore.
Yeah. That's going to be a very interesting story to when that unfolds.
Yeah. It's gonna be fun. People are gonna be like, oh, that was pretty cool. That was neat. I mean, I don't know. It's like, for me, it's kind of like, is it like, would this have been a better story to have told like 20 years ago, or is it like, is it still good? And I'm like, well, I still think this is pretty unique. I haven't seen this, so I'm like, oh yeah, it's kind of a fun take on some things, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
We'll get there.
So obviously this is your flagship title. What are your next 2 titles? Because there was Infinite Souls.
Right. Infinite Souls is particularly interesting right now because we're coming up on Halloween, and it's a Halloween-based book, with Infinite Souls, what happened was I had created a character. I was in this is you get inspiration from the weirdest places. I was in like a Target, I think, or something, and one of the decorations they had out one Halloween was like this, like they had like these fake pumpkins, and they had this black one, and I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. And I started thinking about that as a jack-o'-lantern. Then I started thinking about that as a jack-o'-lantern head, and I was like, oh, black-o'-lantern. And it's like, so you see him way up at the top there on the right-hand side. He's got a black head and a scythe. And I'm like, so I basically created Black-O'-Lantern. And that's the Night Terror guy I was talking down in the left-hand corner.
Yeah.
To the left, go over to the left more.
Oh, sure.
Here he is. That the guy that's got the glowing eyes and the sword kind of thing. That's Night Terror, based on Nightmare and Black Terror merged. But in this tale, what happened was I was kind of poking around with some of my friends and stuff one day on Facebook and looking at their stuff, and I started realizing how many different guys had like pumpkin head characters. So you see one in the back, her name is Jill Lantern at the top, and then there's the guy down in the front, sort of on the right hand side, that's Mr. October. He's got a pumpkin head, and then some other kind of supernatural guys that it's like guys had created them. In fact, I think even Saint Samhain there is the main bad guy right in the middle. His head is it's got the lines of a pumpkin in it. But I reached out to some of them, and I'm like, we've got these Halloween guys. What if we threw them all together and did a Halloween story? And they were like, yeah. So instantly they were all in. So it's like, so these are not all my creations. Only the two guys I mentioned, but the rest of those guys are created, like Roy Johnson of Standard Comics, who does the Sentinels. Saint Samhain is his. Rodney Lockett of Iron Gate, Jill Lantern, and that's Dr. Spectral in front. He's kind of like the main hero leader. Night Demon right down there with the guns. That's Carlos Raphael, as well as Mortis, the green guy with the glowing heart back there. Yeah. And Doc Vampire is Nigel Flood from Ireland. You kind of see him in silhouette there is Baron Lich from Mike Spagnola, who does a lot of great characters and stuff too. So it's like, it's just kind of got these guys, and I was like, let's do this thing. So we did this story, and we did it, and it's shipping right now, or pretty soon. Actually, it's finally shipping for this Halloween. Hopefully it'll be in people's hands by Halloween, because we want to kickstart the second issue right about now. We want to get it up by Halloween, put the second issue, because we're working on that, and we've already got like a great cover and stuff. And there were some catches in getting this thing done. We had to replace the artist because he couldn't stay on the project. Guy that I'd found in Ireland. I was over there because my cousin lives there. I was visiting, and I went to this convention that happened to be there, and I met this guy. It's just this young guy who's just talented. It's crazy talented, and he did the first part of this, and this cover is him. His name is Reese Hannigan, and now he's going to be doing a Star Wars story for Dark Horse. So I'm like, so he's going to be doing really well, but he's really talented. But then I found a guy, his name is Damian Godaluz, if I'm saying it right, Godaluz, who has finished this, and he's amazing as well, brilliant. So I've just been lucky with artists and stuff, and just working with these guys and kind of working on what we can do. In the second issue, we've got even more stuff happening than we did on the first issue. Like one of the guys, I brought in a couple of new guys that have been doing other things because they had these characters that I thought would be great as part of this group, and one of them is Dale Yaddo. He's an artist, and he started making these images of the characters for a trading card set, and the images are gorgeous that he's putting together. And it's like, oh, this is going to be amazing. They look so good. So there's going to be some special things with that one too. So it's like, I just can't wait to get that up and start telling people about it, and show off the cover that we've already got for it, and we've got other things in the works. So it's going to be really exciting, and that's the part 2 of this story.
Okay.
But with any luck, my hope, and it's kind of up to the guys that want to be involved. But I'd kind of like to do like an annual thing out of this. And it's like after this story is told, maybe the next one we do a different villain at the head, and some of the same heroes having to deal with another kind of. It's basically superheroes / supernatural. And I'm like, I kind of like that. I kind of like that niche. I think it's a great place. It's not used as often or as much as it could be, and people tend to really respond well to it. So I'm like, I want to do more of this. And it's like, so we can just maybe do one every year if we're lucky.
Yeah.
And that'd be fun. I think people tend to really respond well to these things. They've gotten very excited about some of these characters. So, and they're fun. They're so much fun. It's like I'm getting to play in other people's playground, in their sandbox. It's like they're, kind of letting me write their characters and stuff, and I'm just having a blast with these guys. They're just really fun characters, really neat. Figuring out how to use them in a creative way that works for what they are and what they aren't, and still play them in is a fun thing for me, because that's like a little bit of a challenge,
Yeah.
figuring out how to like do a story where they all work in a certain way and do what they would do. And it's like, so far I think that's going pretty well. It's been real fun. But yeah, the first issue is shipping to backers from Kickstarter, like I said, right now, and then we'll find some way of making it. I'm sure we'll find some way of making it available for people who still want to get in on it. It's definitely going to be offered in the second Kickstarter. You'll be able to get the first issue, as well as the second one, stuff like that. So.
Yeah. Well, this is very exciting. I definitely can't wait to hear more about this issue 2, and I think you should definitely make this an annual title, because I think you're right. Everyone does like stuff like this, especially when you have characters from other publishers, coming together in this one epic, story. So yeah, if you do have the opportunity to keep doing it, I would do so.
That's my hope. I think that there's a demand for it, and people, like I said, they respond well to it too. So I'm like, oh, this is fun. Yeah. It's just for fun. That's all it is. It's fun. It's not going to change anything. It's not like new, it's not like this is the newest thing you've ever seen, but it's like this is good fun, good, kind of ghostly, ghouly Halloween kind of fun.
Exactly. Okay. So, when Infinite Souls Part 2 comes out, definitely check it out on Alan's Facebook account. So hopefully check that out.
Yeah. And then the other thing that you were asking me about is I had this idea for a steampunk. I've loved steampunk since before they called it steampunk. And I had this idea for a story. And it's like basically the floating cities called Arrow Towns are in this world. And you see it back in the corner there.
Yeah.
They're massive, big cities, and they've been there for so long that people don't even remember how they got there or anything. But they got to be kept up, and it's altitude adjusters that do the maintenance and keep them from falling to the ground. And Sky Guy, his name is Aaron Sky, but he just has his team. He calls Sky Guy and the altitude adjusters, and they get the business for doing the main work on this one Arrow Town. Even though there's other teams that do supplemental work, they're kind of like the main team. And then someone sabotages them one day, and they wind up having to take some other jobs. And that leads to some interesting things. Like the first thing they want to do is figure out who sabotaged them and how they can get the license back. So that's kind of like their main motive. But along the way, they find out a lot of different things that are going to come to light that kind of expose things about the world. For one thing, the guy you see next to him, Marbury, with the horns, the big orange guy, he's from the surface, and they're called surface dwellers or groundlings, or if you're using a derogatory term, they're called ground monsters. But basically, the people who live on the surface of the planet are all like kind of mutants like that. They don't look human, so they're not they're not very welcome in the Arrow Towns very much. But he works with Sky Guy, and he's amazing. Thing about him is, and I think it's funny right now because people are talking about with AI art, it's like, oh, count the fingers, and it's like, well, if you count them on Marbury, he's got an extra thumb on each hand, but that's how he's designed. It's Ryan Best, who's been working on some books. Rise was something that he's just done recently. Also, he did the art. He's the artist on this series for me, and he's just fantastic too. He's really talented, really great guy.
Yeah.
So that, these guys they've all got their specialties. Sky Guy is kind of like, he's the pilot, because they have to use these the ships you see at the bottom. They're called sky sloops, and they kind of they're sort of like a cross between they have a back end space where it's like a pickup truck, but it's like they can stand up and work in there while they're hovering underneath the aerotowns and stuff. So he's a pilot. Marbury is just kind of like the brute force and kind of like knows how to do things. They have to change these, these gear things inside of the turbines in the city that are huge and heavy. Serena, she basically on her spare time develops she's kind of a tech genius. She develops weapons. In fact, she's come up with one that like nobody ever heard of. It's crazy and powerful. But she's kind of like she's kind of a spitfire, to say it to be mild. And then down on the right, you see Loris, which is her brother. And they're named after. I named them. I didn't base them on anybody, but they're named after a friend of mine's kids. Their names are Serena and Loris, and I'm like, those are great. I'm going to use those names for my brother sister team on this book. But Loris is like he's like kind of like this wicked genius for technology. He's the guy that can like figure out how to make things and stuff. And one of the things he made is right next to him. That's Tom, the automaton. And one of the things about Tom that's really interesting is Tom has started to kind of like there's only certain things that he's like supposed to be able to wind up and do, but he's got things that he kind of starts doing that aren't in the realm of that. And he also starts to kind of take this like protective, affectionate role with Loris. And it's like, this isn't your normal automaton. What's going on here? It's like that's one of the things that starts to kind of like go, well, there's more to the story. They're going to learn a lot more than just who sabotaged them along the way. It's a really fun story. And I've got some pictures of some of the characters in there that are in the book that will be. We also have pirates, and we have witches on the witch on the ground, pirates in the sky. There's a lot of good fun stuff in there. I mean, I'm kind of thinking of it as like cozy steampunk, I think for the most part, I think any age could read it, but it's definitely a little bit, it's not written for kids or anything, but I don't think there's anything there that would be offensive to anybody.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that it'll stay that way, but I'm trying to keep it, because a lot of steampunk gets a little racy, and I'm trying to keep this a little bit more, not so much, but still be, exciting and fun and cool and have that kind of steampunk.
Yeah.
Ambiance. Yeah.
Exactly. Just the concept, I'm just looking at the image again, and I'm like, if Lucasfilm hadn't been sold to Disney, I think they would have produced this.
Yeah, that's the other thing that it's in the weird in the back of my mind is like, I get a couple issues of this out. This might be something that I could show to somebody for an animated feature. Yeah. I actually think it would be perfect. I mean, I hadn't really, that wasn't my plan when I created it. My plan was to do something in the steampunk because there wasn't enough steampunk for me. It's like we had Lady Mechanica and like nothing else. And I'm like, I want more steampunk comics. And I'm like, well, I had this idea, and it's like, boom, here we are. And there's more to it. It's basically it's steampunk mutants and magic is what I've been kind of just a little bit of everything thrown into it. But I think it's a lot of fun.
Oh yeah.
Except for Serena, basically I blow the rest of them up at the end of the first issue.
Yep.
Blow them up. As far as you know. Obviously not, because there's another issue. Now this book I've actually had, believe it or not, sitting finished for quite a while. I've been kind of like worrying myself over how do I best promote it? How do I really give it the kind of marketing it deserves? It's like, I am not that guy. I'm not good at that. So I'm kind of like been trying to build up some ideas and talk to some people and stuff. And I'm now getting some help from someone, and finally going to launch this. Finally going to let this guy out in January.
All right.
There'll be a Kickstarter for this in January, and we'll finally be launching it. And we're trying to do some special things for it, and that will be really cool. And the second book is already in the works, so this is already completed as far as the comic goes, and I'm really excited to get that out there. I've just got to share it around and get people to know about it, because it's really, I think anybody would love this.
Yeah,
it's real fun.
Yeah, it's got everything you would want in a comic. you know, just from your description, and of course, just looking at it, I'm like, it's got everything.
Yeah.
So
And
definitely
it's
why
funny.
to read comics that has everything in it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and the funny thing about it is, you mentioned, like Lucasfilm or Disney, and it's like, interestingly enough, the variant cover that I had done for this is kind of like, that original poster for Star Wars.
Yeah,
It's a spoof on that, where it's like in that original poster for Star Wars, you have like the X-wing fighters coming up. So I use the sky sloops, and you have like, Han Solo with the gun out, and it's like, and you've got like, Chewbacca, and you've got Luke, and you've got all that stuff. So I kind of like, use these guys, and I kind of like form it around as like, well, that's kind of where they'd be, and it's like, so it's kind of like this take on that original Star Wars poster. That's like, you could kind of see it, that I had, done by, Oliver Dela Cruz. I had him do like a variant for me, and it's just fun. It's just fun, and I'm trying right now. I think I'm trying to get a third cover. So I only have the two covers, but I was like, maybe I can get a third one. We'll see. But yeah.
Yeah. Alan, I'm very excited for you, especially with your projects coming up. I'd like to thank you for coming on here to talk with us about it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Again, thank you for letting me just carry on.
No. You don't understand. Especially, I love it when my guests, who are creators as well. They're very passionate about the projects they want to talk about. So that's always great for me because I just love to listen and just hear what their the creative process, but also their creation. So I can say, you know what, I definitely want to buy this.
It's I appreciate hearing that. I've been a guy who's loved comics since before I knew what comics were. My first thing when I was 5 years old, I sat down and I did this thing which was visual storytelling. I was drawing a stick figure, and I basically, I was 5 years old. I created this trash can man guy. Basically, he wore those old metal round trash cans. He had
Yeah,
one of those inverted for armor, and he used the lid for a shield, and he had a sword. And his enemy was a garbage truck that turned into kind of a monster. It was like, could have been a transformer, but it was before Transformers ever existed. And I was doing this at 5 years old. I'd never read a comic book in my life. I was already, trying to
yeah,
create comic books before I even knew what they were. So
yeah,
it's like, and then I've grown up and I've always been a writer my whole life. So it's like, it stands to reason that I would have wound up doing this for a living, but
yeah.
it's always been there. But
Yeah, you and I speak the same language because when I was a kid, I was just drawing space battles, all over
you
my.
know, yeah, when you know. Now, of course,
Yeah,
I was using stick figures, so I knew I wasn't going to be an artist. but yeah,
yeah,
the story ideas, they come and they just keep coming. So, and I do get excited about them. I'm like, sometimes as a creator, how much we have self doubt.
oh yeah,
I have that all the time, but when I stop and I think about it and I'm talking to somebody about this, I'm really excited about my stuff. I'm like, then I suddenly realize how much I believe in it. It's like, this is really good, and how excited I am about it. I'm like, no, really, people, this is good. It's like, it's so hard for me to pump myself, but it's like, but really, it's like, no, it is good. You do want to read this, follow it, just trust me, go with me, It's like, sometimes in those first issues, it's like, oh, it's a little bit of setup here, but just trust me, get interested in where we're going, It's
yeah,
like, yeah, but at the same time, start to know the characters, which is hopefully enough to be interesting. If I don't throw too many of them at you at once, which I tend to like to do, but I think that's my ADD.
it's all right.
It's like, I'm all over the map. It's like, okay, I got this guy, that guy, this girl, that girl. It's like,
Trust me, that's like just telling people about your project, especially that you're passionate about. That's with everybody. It's not just it's not specific people. That's for everybody that's ever created or written for comics. So yeah,
I love to see it too. I mean, I love that with other guys too. It's like, I see them and they're talking and telling me about their stuff, and they get going, and I'm like, oh wow, this is really cool. And then of course, what my mind is like, what my mind starts thinking, well, what would I do with that? Oh, that's why sometimes I felt. I also am an editor for authors and stuff,
yeah,
for book authors and stuff. And I've helped. I've got a USA Today bestseller who is like my main client, and I've helped her develop some of her stories and given her like feedback that she's used and stuff. And it's like, I'm like pretty good as a developmental editor, and I like doing it, but I'm not I'm not doing as much of it as I'd like. I'd like to do more of it, but and I can help people. I've helped some people with comics too. So, I mean, I was on staff at Marvel Comics. There's a reason, there's a reason why I know about like how to develop and what you need to, to bring in the. It's like I just hope I'm applying it to what I'm writing. Editors are not always our best editor,
Yeah.
But
yeah. Sometimes you have to step out of your own, mind for a second. Let someone else read it. Say, okay, how does this sound to you?
Right. As a creator, we tend to fall in love with our creations, and it's like that's not always the most helpful thing when it comes to the editing side. It's like if you're too in love with your own thing, you might have a blind eye to something that needs adjusting. I did go to a friend of mine, Gregory Wright. He used to work at Marvel with me as editor. I did go to him with SPIS after I'd released a couple of issues. And I said, "Can you take a look at this and give me some feedback?" And he gave me some feedback, and I'm going, "Oh God, I should have come to him before I let out. Now I got to figure out how to fix these things." And I'm starting to figure out how to fix them. It's like, well, one of the things is to do this companion book that shows this other perspective on things from these particular characters' POV. That starts to kind of fix a couple of things that I think were like I didn't do right, And I'm like, going, that'll kind of like do it. Plus, it gives me something to do that's will be fun and exciting for the readers as well.
Yeah, exactly. So
it's like, it's a win-win. It fixes things and it's something else that's fun. Great. Yeah, I'm good. Doesn't fix everything, but we'll get there.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Okay. As we're coming to the end of the show, I'd like to obviously plug in my own work as well, like I normally do. So here is my series, Codename Hunter. We have issues 1 through 3 on IndiePlaid.com. It is a sci-fi spy thriller. So picture James Bond meets Star Trek meets Star Wars, and just a dash of Guardians of the Galaxy.
Sounds fun.
Yeah. So we got issues 1 through 3 on here. Currently working on issue 4 right now. I'm going to be sending the next slew of pages to my inker, Enrique Lopez, so we can ink all the issue 4 together. So he's inked issues 3 cover with me. So this is his work.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I was very proud of the work that we did here. So I'm very pleased that I'm still collaborating with him. I will be collaborating with him going forward. So I'm very excited about that.
Sounds exciting.
Yeah. So issues 1 through 3, Codename Hunter on IndiePlaid.com. And also, if you're in the mood to buy some t-shirts, come to tpublic.com. And these are my designs on the Little Ian merch. Just type it in, Little Ian merch in the search bar, and you've got a variety of designs from my other character, Little Ian, and of course from my Codename Hunter character. We just launched a new one just last week. It's a Halloween one, and it's Little Ian surviving Halloween trick-or-treaters.
I love it.
Yeah, so check it out, especially if you want to wear something for Halloween.
I love it.
Yeah.
That's
okay. Cool. That's it for us today. Alan, thank you again for coming on.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Of course. And once again, folks, I'm Ian Miller, and this has been Triple Threat Comics YouTube channel. Have a good day, folks.